What Mustafa Hegazi had to say, that they're looking into the possibility of dissolving the Muslim Brotherhood.
A murderer, whether he holds a press conference or not, is still a murderer. This is not a government. This is a mafia. This is a mafia that usurped the power and the state institutions in Egypt. Without any democratic institutions, without a democratic constitution, without democratic institutions, there's no legitimate basis for what he's saying. They are committing murder after another. They're committing mass murder against innocent, peaceful Egyptians. We're seeing it day in and day out. They murdered thousands on Wednesday, and we will hold them accountable. The international community will hold them accountable for those violations of human rights, for those murders that they're committing every day in Egypt. Nothing would justify killing innocent, peaceful Egyptians on the streets. The Egyptians, as a free Egyptian, myself, and as all Egyptians in the Egyptian streets, we will not allow them to take the power in Egypt using the power of bullets and tanks. We will be peaceful, and we will remain peaceful, and we will get our democratic institution back by our peacefulness. What Mr. Hegazi said, the face of the mafia, what he said is that on what basis is he saying anything? He doesn't have any legal basis for what he says. This is a mafia that took the power using the power of bullets and tanks. They are trying to justify to the world their massacres and their crimes, and the international community should stand together against this.
Now, Mustafa Hegazi called the Muslim Brotherhood and its supporters terrorists and extremists, and Hazem Bablawi, the interim prime minister, says that most of the victims yesterday were the result of fighting between Muslim Brotherhood elements and civilians. So the interim government laying the blame for the violence on what he called Muslim Brotherhood elements.
They hijacked the power using tanks and bullets. For the past 2 years, during the democratic transition in Egypt, we've been consistent winners in the democratic process, and they have been losers. And they hijacked and usurped the power using the bullets and the tanks. There's no violence. It's only violence from their side. It's unilateral, excessive, criminal use of violence against innocent, peaceful Egyptians. What they're trying to do is that they're trying to fabricate, and this is their propaganda machine trying to justify their crimes against humanity. These crimes they will have to pay for. We are going to hold them accountable in front of in The Hague and in British courts. We will hold them accountable, and they will pay for their crimes.
How are you going to take this case to The Hague then, Mona?
We have employed international lawyers, and they are currently putting forward the papers for the case in the UK first, and then we're also taking it to The Hague. This is not 1954. This is not Nasser's time. They cannot kill the Egyptian people in absence or in the silence of the international community. It is 2013, and the international community can see what they're doing. They are killing innocent Egyptians every day. We've seen the besieging of the Fatah Mosque in Cairo last night for over 13 hours. Innocent Egyptians were detained. 4 Irish people were inside as well. The Irish government has asked for the release of those Irish citizens from the mosque, and the international community see how criminal they can be, how criminally they can hold innocent peaceful people inside a mosque for hours and hours without food, without anything, and then killing them while throwing gas canisters against inside the mosque, and which led to further deaths.
Now, Mona, what will the Muslim Brotherhood do if the government does try to dissolve the Muslim Brotherhood, like it's saying?
I say again, it's not up to them to decide on anything. They are illegitimate. They are putschists. They came to power on the back of the bullets and the tanks. The only power they have is not the power of dialogue, not the power of the constitution, not the power of legitimacy. The only power they have is the power of the bullets and the tanks. We will remain defiant. We will remain peaceful, and the Egyptian people, not only the Muslim Brotherhood, will not stay quiet against their crimes. We will we will remain peaceful, and we will take it to the streets until the end of the end of this military rule to Egypt, until we build again our democratic Egypt away from this military junta, away from this mafia.
Now, you keep saying that the protests have been peaceful, but we did see some people carrying weapons. It wasn't clear who those people were, whether they were part of the protests or whether they were planted there. But we have seen images of people among the protesters carrying weapons.
This is baseless. This is their propaganda machine trying to frame us. Associated Press mentioned that these are plainclothes policemen holding weapons. Even Jeremy Bowen from the BBC said he has seen none of the protesters holding any weapons. For over 48 days, we've had peaceful sit-in under the international scrutiny. And you've seen, the international media, Al Jazeera, have seen how the sit-ins have been peaceful in Rabaa and in Nahda and all over Egypt. They are the ones trying to frame us. The numbers of casualties actually speak for themselves. They are killing us. They are killing the innocent, peaceful Egyptians who are calling out loud for their democracy. And it's not about the Muslim Brotherhood now. It is about our dream of Egypt. Hundreds of thousands and millions of Egyptians are taking the streets in every province of Egypt, calling for their democracy. It's not about It's not about the Muslim Brotherhood. It is about the return of our democracy, the return of our human rights.
Now, the Muslim Brotherhood and the so-called anti-coup alliance have called for more protests, and we can see images there from Helwan in southern Cairo where one such protest is continuing. How long will you keep up these protests?
How long did it take Mandela to get over the apartheid in South Africa? We can't give up to this mafia. We will not stop, and we will remain defiant and peaceful against them. We will remain peaceful, and we have to get our Egypt back. We cannot give up to them, because they are killers. We've seen a return of a dictatorship, a return of a Mubarak regime. We've seen emergency law back. We've seen state security back, arresting people, murdering people, kidnapping people. We've seen almost every family in Cairo now, especially East Cairo, has lost a loved one or a friend. We've seen mass murder. The worst state-led massacre was led by this military junta, and it's also obviously cheer-led by the civilian faces they hired to cover up their crimes. This should not continue. The international community should not allow this to continue. And as an Egyptian person, and all Egyptians will not allow this mafia to continue running Egypt.
Now, over 700 people, though, have been killed since Wednesday in protests, including Mohammed Badie's son. Aren't you worried about more people dying?
Again, you're asking a victim not to be killed, and you're not asking the murderer not to stop committing the crimes. We are victims. I personally lost 5 friends on Wednesday, 5 very close friends. One of them was a young woman who was taking refuge, was taking shelter in one of the tents, and the criminals lit fire on the tent so that she was burnt alive. This is the crimes they are committing day in and day out, and tacit condemnation by the international community is not enough. The international community should stand together and uphold the democratic principles, should stand together and uphold the human rights, and take those criminals to justice. Those criminals should be held accountable for the killings and the killing of the Egyptian people and the killing for our Egyptian democracy.
Now, at this point, you've mentioned wanting a return to democracy. What does that mean for you, a return to democracy?
First of all, the military should step out of the political scene. It creates an imbalance. Second of all, return of all democratic institutions. Third of all, those criminals, and above most, those criminals should be brought to justice. These are traitors. These are people who have committed crimes against humanity. Those people should be brought to justice in front of the world. And fourth of all, there should be a national reconciliation between all different parts of Egypt, because those putschists and those criminals have actually made the polarization worse in Egypt. We should be bringing the Egyptian people together. We should be standing together for a better future for ourselves and for our children to come.
You talk about bringing people to account. Are you working with anybody, with human rights organizations to do that?
Yes, of course. Human rights organizations, international human rights organizations, have been covering the massacres one after the other in Egypt and have been producing reports. It's actually quite shameful what the Egyptian and national human rights organizations have been doing. They have been working as a propaganda machine for the regime, for the criminal regime. They have been covering up the crimes and failing to recognize mass murder on the side of the state police. The Ministry of Interior unashamedly vowed to use live ammunition against innocent, peaceful civilians. We're seeing people falling not in tens, not in hundreds, and the correct number we're actually getting from the makeshift field hospitals is over 3,000 now since Wednesday.
Okay, Mona, thank you for speaking to us. Mona Alqazzaz is with the Muslim Brotherhood. She was speaking to us live from London.